Hey, this is Mr. Eason with Homework Help. Welcome to 4th grade edition of Homework Help. So I'll be continuing to make these videos, but for my new 4th graders, we are continuing to use bridges, but I'm going to do my best to explain everything really well. That way there are no confusions or anything at home. So, what we've been working on so far is just kind of reviewing some multiplication skills from last year, mainly focusing on those multiplication facts. We've been doing that in the context of a teacher who is collecting school supplies. So I'm going to work through a couple questions to kind of show you how we've done them in class, because there are a couple in your homework that are like that. So 4 students each brought in 5 erasers. How many erasers did these 4 students bring? They're supposed to write an equation, show an answer with correct units, and show work. Now this one doesn't give very much space to show work, but we can do our best. So the first thing is we're going to write some kind of equation here. So this is a multiplication question. They're asking us to do 5 times 4, and so what I've been asking the students to do is to write that multiplication equation, 5 times 4, put an equal sign, and put a letter to represent the unknown. We call that a variable in middle and high school, but we're just calling it a letter for now. And so I'm going to use E for erasers. 5 times 4 equals E. And so they're going to solve that. There are lots of ways to solve it, and I'm going to show you some strategies on the 3rd page here. But the answer to 5 times 4 equals E, obviously the answer is going to be 20, so we're going to write 20 erasers. It is important that when it asks for a label, we put a label. Okay? You would look at the same thing for number 2. 4 students brought in 6 erasers. How many erasers did the 4 students bring? We're going to write a new expression, or equation that is. 6 times 4 equals E. And we could use our 5 times 4 fact, knowing it's 20, and add 4 more on to make 24 erasers. 24 erasers. Alright, so we're going to look at another example of something they might see in the homework on the next slide. The next slide is a number line puzzle, and all they're doing is they're asking you to look through the puzzle and decide what numbers go in the blank. So we can do that probably pretty easily. 2 times 6 is going to be 12. You can count by 2's there. 3 times 6, you can take your 12 and add 6 more on to make 18. Blank times 6 equals 30. You have to think about how many 6's are in 30, so you could think about this in terms of a division sentence if you wanted. Or you might notice that 12 and 18 add up to 30. And so if they add up to 30, you could think of this as being a 2 and a 3, and that would be a 5. However you'd like to think about it is fine. It's going to be a 5 right there in the blank. 8 times 6, they tell us, is 48, and then blank times 6 is 60. So hopefully we know that 6 times something equals 60. We can fill that in being 10. If not, there were some ways you could use our number line here. We could think about 30 doubled is 60, so 5 doubled would be what goes in this blank here. And you could even think of 8 times 6 and 2 times 6 being 60, and that'd be 10 times 6. So I'm going to show you guys a couple strategies in the next slide that we've been talking about in class, just to kind of help us with some multiplication facts. These should be a review from last year. So on the last page, we're going to talk about some multiplication strategies. We're going to talk about multiplication strategies for 4s, for 6s, and for 9s today, just really quickly. So when you're doing 4s, those are a number that some people kind of have trouble with. That's kind of where people start getting confused. They're great with their 2s, they're great with their 5s and their 10s and their 1s and even their 0s, but maybe the 4s are the first place where we get stuck. So we're going to use our 2s to help us with our 4s. If I'm trying to figure out a multiplication fact of maybe 8 times 4, in my head, I am thinking that I'm going to do 8 times 2 and add it to another 8 times 2. We call this the double strategy. Some people may remember from 3rd grade a teacher saying double, toil and trouble. But you're going to think about 8 times 2 being 16. Think about this 8 times 2 being 16, and you're just adding them together. This is just how you would write that out typically. If students are good with the strategy, they can think about 8 times 2 being 16, and then doubling it and making 32 just like that, nice and quick. Okay, I'm going to show you the next strategy we're thinking about, which is a 6 strategy. So if you're working on your 6 multiplication facts, the best thing I've found to do is to think about your 5 multiplication facts. So if I want to think about the fact 7 times 6, that's typically one of the hardest facts for students to remember. I am going to start thinking about 7 times 5 first, because that's a fact that everybody knows. Then I'm going to add another group of 7 on, because what I've got here is I'm trying to figure out what 6 groups is. I have 5 groups here, so I'm going to add one more group on. So this is 5 groups and 1 group, make that 6 groups right there. So I've got 35 plus 7, and that is going to be 42. All right? We're going to look at one more example of that 6 strategy, because I think it could be a little bit complex. So I'm going to erase this, hopefully. I like to be able to erase a lot at once, though. So we are going to think about the multiplication fact 9 times 6 this time. All right. So if I'm doing 9 times 6, I'm going to start off by thinking about 9 times 5 and adding on another 9. So I've got 45 plus 9. That's going to equal 54. I know there are lots of 9 tricks as well with your fingers and the fact that, they all add up to 9, but this is just a nice efficient one. Plus, it's going to work well for all the 9s. And we're going to look at that 9 strategy the next slide, and then we'll be done. So, last slide we're going to think about is the 9s strategy. So, I'm going to think about a fact that also gets people confused a lot, which is 8 times 9. And so what we've been trying to do in class is think about 8 times 10 instead. 8 times 10 is 80. And then we're going to take that 80 and subtract 8 from it to get 72. All right? So that is the strategy. You're thinking about 10 groups and taking off 1 group. These strategies are all for people who kind of forget some of these multiplication facts. They're a really good strategy to remember. If a student has a multiplication fact memorized, that's great. They still need to have some kind of way to show it, mainly because when they're doing some larger multiplication in the future, which is what we do in 4th grade, they can still use these strategies to help them, and they can do some really good mental math instead of having to write everything down on a sheet of paper. So, this has been a lot for one video, and I hope this will help you guys with your homework if you have any questions. This has been Mr. Easton with Homework Help. Thank you, and have a great day.